Okay, great. Okay, and before we start, I just want to do introductions, within the Buyers Remorse team. My name is Nicola Singh. I am teaching fellow in fine art at the University of Leeds, and my pronouns are she and her. Can I pass to Carmen, please?
Hi, my name is Carmen, and I am currently a student at University of Leeds School of Fine Art. I'm a fine art student. I'm in third year, so in a week or 2 weeks I will be graduating, and my pronouns are she, her.
Yeah, my name's Zipporah. I'm an art history student. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm also about to graduate, so yeah.
And I'm Helen. I teach museum and heritage studies in the School of Fine Art, History of Art and Cultural Studies, and my pronouns are she, her.
Great, thanks everyone. Okay, so welcome again. We've invited you all here today to share in our reflections on organising and delivering Buyers Remorse. We'll be summarising the different speaker presentations from the programme, offering an account of what we heard in the presentations and what this has meant for our understanding of anti-racist organising and practices of decolonisation in relation to our school community. And Zipporah and Carmen will also be returning to their original impetus to instigate the project. For the final part of the event, we are going to hold some space for some silent reflection, for you to consider what you may have heard during this talk. So we're suggesting that a process of careful listening is pivotal in practices of consciousness raising around intersectional experiences of oppression. Okay, so brief introduction. We're going to smooth right into talking about how it felt for us to work together. This is like the abridged version in Zipporah's words, and I think we're going to make like a text together that goes into it more fully. But to start that, can I hand over, Helen, is that all right? Hand over to you.
Absolutely, thank you. So the initial context for me in starting to work with Nicola around anti-racist organising generally, and then to working with Zipporah and Carmen to support their project, was not primarily the school, but actually a museum I was working with at the time, a place which in November 2019 was teeming with new and very shaky conversations about race, and in particular about whiteness. So I came into early 2020 having gone through a kind of crash course in not facilitating well other white people thinking about whiteness, and really realising I hadn't in any way thought about whiteness enough myself. It was speaking with Nicola and then with Zipporah and Carmen, I realised too clearly and properly felt that I had really been outsourcing my work on race to my research projects and not doing the work at home, in my school, in my place of work and where I teach. So for me, the experience of working with Nicola and our colleague Mackie on anti-racist organising in general, and with Nicola, Zipporah and Carmen on this Buyers Remorse project, has been an absolute requirement to bring this work close, to let it live under my skin and as part of my everyday work in the institution I've worked in as a full-time member of staff since 2011. So there are no excuses for not having done so before. I will always owe so much to the persistently fresh recognition, sharp realisations and small of necessary accountability that have gone along with the sheer joy, laughter and pleasure of working with Nicola, Zipporah and Carmen.
Thank you, Helen. Cool. I'm going to talk about some of that administrative stuff that's come up in the organising. So in making it happen, Buyers Remorse, we've come against various administrative processes that have had the potential to inform positive structural change in relation to policy, procedure and governance, so that have the potential. Particularly juicy negotiations included trying to source the statistics of ethnicity and race of staff and students, campaigning for a fee level for Buyers Remorse speakers that went some way to acknowledging the labour of Black people and people of colour to come in and aid our institutional work of anti-racism in the school. We are massively underrepresented as a school in relation to people of colour, and so this expertise had to be brought in. The labour becomes racialised. At points, we were also asked to defend a need for this project in a school that has a history of working with feminism and Marxism. These conversations, email and in person, were sometimes very uncomfortable and coerced through white defensiveness and institutional defensiveness. In dealing with these and other moments, Helen and I organized via an acknowledgement of our different contextual privileges, focusing on our racial identities, institutional roles, and contractual statuses to make strategic decisions. In my opinion, we also organized with a deep sense of care for one another. This care was also felt within us as the wider Buyers Remorse team, and I can't stop myself from smiling, I guess, when I think about it. Our organizing was filled with respect, with laughter, with warmth, care, and mutual support. Texts were written collaboratively, complaints processed together, and labor was shared in relation to capacity and roles. Carmen and Zipporah, do you want to talk any more about working together, Nadine?
Yes. As you said, Nicola, it was a great experience. Like, I really enjoyed working with everybody. Like, that was such a great synergy, if I would use like a corporate word to describe it, but like it was great. Like, I feel like we had a type of way of working together that was very like collaborative and respectful, and like I feel like as students we couldn't have gone Buyers Remorse to where it could have been like where it is now without you guys as like insight as staff, as like people who like knew more about processes that we wouldn't have been able to do. Like Helen with the ethics wouldn't be able to do the ethics for. Like, and just especially with us doing dissertations and doing like a whole like course at the same time would be the heavy workload to have, which is doing it by ourselves. It wouldn't have been as good without all of us working together, all of us respecting each other, all of us like just bringing all of our individual ideas and just like really just making it something like really pretty and nice. So yeah.
And kind of just to add another element of it, I think one of the things that struck me while working with Helen and Nicola was the fact that and even other members of staff and people who supported the project, was there was this real conscious respect for who that, first of all, there was the knowledge that every single person involved in the project respected the work we were doing and what we wanted to do and the reason why we were doing this. There was at no point were we ever justifying the project to each other. And because when you stand with that knowledge, I noticed that I could say, if Helen's, not to single Helen out, but if I've not come to a meeting, I know that like Helen, Nicola, and Zipporah aren't wondering if I've lost interest. It's no, Carmen can't be here right now, and that's okay. And it's this knowledge that not only do we respect each other as people and as artists or art practitioners, but also as people who are involved in this work and in this burden. And I think as well, another thing that really became clear was we worked without a hierarchy, and we didn't work as student and staff, we worked as a team, and the team existed within its own microcosm of, you know, Buyers Remorse was a world separate to the university life. And I mean, Helen was in charge of my ethics application for dissertation, and Nicola was one of my, taught me. And so I had this very like two-pronged experience of like, these were people who I had as academically were higher up than me, but they were also people who I was working with in a very like non-hierarchical fashion at the same time, and it translated to the way I interacted with them. And it just, I think it became very clear to me that that hierarchy didn't serve this type of work, and to an extent I don't think it served in the position in academia either, because I found with that non-hierarchical perspective of Helen and Nicola, I felt more comfortable coming to them as people and talking to them and being honest with them, because I didn't feel the need to maintain a hierarchy. So yeah, I think that respect and that acknowledgement of non-hierarchical structure was very important to the way Buyers Remorse works. And I think it's the reason why we could laugh and joke and support each other and care for each other in a way that was more genuine. And I think it helped the project, and I think it continues to help the project.
Thank you. Thanks, Carmen, Zipporah. Thanks, Helen. Okay, so we're going to move into reflecting on the speaker series. We're going to take it in turns. I'm going to go first. I'm going to talk about Zarina Mohammed's talk. So I'm reading from my notes. Zarina Mohammed is an art critic with White Pew. White Pew published exhibition reviews and critical texts online. As part of this platform's arena, and their partner Gabriela De La Puente often speak directly to structural racism as it shows itself in the sector. And our invitation to Zarina was to share some of those experiences more explicitly. So this was the first talk in the Buyers Remorse program. And I want to begin my account of Zarina's talk with some information on how my body reacted to introducing and facilitating this talk and a number of other talks in the Buyers Remorse series. In the context of introducing Zarina's talk, my hands and legs were trembling as I spoke, and then through parts of Zarina's talk also. This is a common experience for me when communicating issues of racism in white majority situations. It's the effect of my nervous system acting in overdrive in response to my learnt understanding that to speak about racism within white spaces is transgressive and unsafe. And in this situation, I guess my body was also acting in overdrive to somehow want to protect Zarina too. This edginess stored in my body, a form of somatic knowledge, was compounded by my experience as a racial minority in this school and by my material conditions as a precarious employee on a fixed term contract doing this work outside of workloaded hours. So to my observations from the talk, which I have structured as an account of what I heard. I heard Zarina describe accounts of racism, of white people not making eye contact with her in public in professional contexts and only engaging with Gabriela, who is white. From my own experience, I know that racism can manifest itself as white people not looking at people of color or Black people in the face, ignoring their presence or not registering their presence at all. Racism can take the form of unconscious and conscious non-language-based gestures and body languages. I heard Zarina share a traumatic instance of violent racism online, and that she then experienced further racism in her treatment from the police when she reached out for support. The police suggested that Zarina not use the internet for her work as an art critic that publishes online. I heard Zarina describe an experience of racism in chairing an international conference, the layers of racism, defensiveness, and the physical and verbal aggression that resulted from her calling out one of the conference speakers on their project, which presented an extractive, exploitative, and racist attitude toward the experience of a person seeking asylum. In this account, I heard the familiar trope of the arts and academia using the lived experience of minorities and oppressed communities for gain. I heard Zarina describe institutional racism as organizational and individual incompetence that is purported via patriarchal white mediocrity and insecurity. I heard Zarina, Zipporah, and Carmen share common experiences of structural racism in UK institutions. They said that it feels like an insidious set of conditions that via white supremacy are positioned as a problem created by Black people and people of colour, and which are then positioned in a neoliberal sense as something that these people need to transcend as individuals. This reality can lead Black people and people of colour to deny their identity, to fit in, to shrink themselves. I heard the deeply traumatizing effects of this. I heard about the violence of our current party political agenda in describing Britain as a post-racial society, how this is white supremacy disguised as liberal politics, and the way in which this continues to deny, dehumanize, enact psychological and physical violence and instrumentalize the experience and lives of Black people and people of colour. I heard from Zarina, Zipporah, and Carmen, and guest audience members that their experiences of universities as majority white-led organizations are places in which these ideas propagate. I heard Zarina, Zipporah, and Carmen describe intergenerational ways of processing racism, of connections between mental health issues in their communities with deeply embedded racial trauma. Ancestral, intergenerational, and day-to-day processing of racism is a lived reality for people of colour and Black people. Okay, handing over to Zipporah. Yeah.
Thank you, Nicola. Okay, I'm going to be talking about our talk with Museum Detox, specifically Sam. Okay, so Museum Detox is a network for minoritized people that work in arts and heritage. Sam is an arts engagement consultant and part of Museum Detox. In conversation with Sam, we talked about why museum detox is needed, the experience of marginalized communities in the sector, if it's at all possible to actually decolonize a museum. Even though the talk centered mostly on museums and decolonisation, there were many parallels that apply to this school too. First of all, when discussing the need for museum detox, Sam listed the following abysmal stats. Stats such as 12% of people are ethnically diverse in the arts, and 5 to 6% in heritage, which is probably less now due to COVID. Further saying 8% of Art Council funded organizations have POC CEOs, and 90% of Arts Council organizations are white-led, and 10% are ethnically diverse in leadership roles. In the same way that the arts and heritage sector have horrendous numbers in terms of diversity, our school has the exact same problem, which is overwhelmingly white. And when you think about it in terms of cause and effect, the schools like this, who have such horrible numbers in terms of marginalized students, are contributing to this poor representation in the arts and heritage sector. A small number of minority students isn't just bad for fostering a sad future for the arts sector, but it creates a school community that is the opposite of inclusive. Carmen and I joke all throughout this project that the way we became friends was because we were each other's first Black person we saw in school. We joke about this, but this is a really sad case of non-inclusivity. In the Decolonisation workshop, designing a decolonized FACAS led by Abiha Khan, we went through the fully detailed stats of exactly how much we were here, seeing the look of low expectations met, along with looks of dismay on others' faces, along with my own, was weirdly both sad and affirming, like having something I've always known but never said aloud, always thinking at the back of my head, become indisputable fact, shocked but not surprised. Sam spoke very well on the hypocritical reactions museums displayed in the summer of 2020 BLM. Institutions pledging and promising many things were empty. Bias training and various other incremental changes made only played a role of giving the appearance to care. No institutional change was attempted. Likewise, FACAS made a statement in support of BLM with not much to back up such claims. This is weirdly how a project kind of got funded. We've spoken many times through this project about how we found our funding, in which we had applied for Leeds Footsteps funding and received no reply. Then BLM reached its height and our school made a response. This made me angry. To me, this response lacked any validity or authenticity. It included no acknowledgement of the racism that currently sits within this school. The only example of work being done was a workshop postponed. The only action taken, a pledge and a promise that we will be good in the future, enabled with a better curriculum. How does this support and advocate for Black lives? How does this help me? I asked myself as I wrote the fateful email to Nick, which would put both Carmen and I in contact with Nicola and Helen to secure us funding. My point is, if it wasn't for the summer of BLM, I'm pretty sure we would not have gotten funded. As I leave, I wonder if the work this group started will continue in any substantial way. Will this project be another example of this school's faux performative activism? Racism and colonialism is in the bones of museums and universities, and in this school too. This insidious fact must be realized and acted upon with the heavy weight it deserves.
And thank you. And I'll speak on our event with Akila Bertram. So Akila is a cross-disciplinary artist who uses digital art to explore complex cultural narratives focusing on those cultures formed as a result of colonialism. In addition to that, Akila is also an alumni of the fine art course, which I am currently on, and went to the school, I believe, 4 or 5 years ago. Nicola will correct me, or someone will correct me if I'm wrong. And throughout this talk, we really wanted to discuss what a decolonized art practice is. What is it in this experience? What is it as an artist? And therefore, what does it mean to be a student learning art and learning how to be a decolonized artist and how to choose that path for your practice? A couple things became fairly clear, but I'm going to highlight specifically one right now, which is the experience of artists of color is about acknowledging the histories of racism and colonialism, because the experience of a person of color is to know what it is to live in a racist society, to understand fundamentally what being underrepresented in academia is. What is that to be felt? To not be considered in a hard worker or someone who can achieve well. What racism is when it is lived. And that is what we discussed with Akila, in this awareness that artists of color are aware of that, and that therefore students of color are aware of that. They live that experience. They might not understand the sociological premises around them, or they might not understand the philosophy around them, or why, or the academic reasonings behind it, but they know the effects. And that was an increased understanding that I wanted to communicate. I heard from her and from Akila and from myself and from Zip that there's a different default for students of color and for artists of color. They have a different perspective. And this is something that I said often, but I don't think it's understood for what it means, which is their fundamental view is incredibly different to everyone else. They live an external life that is different from their internal life. Their education and their perspective is very, very different because they are a person of color who lives in a white dominated sphere. And that different default isn't being translated to the school. And that was what I heard us say, that our perspective, our different default wasn't being accounted for. To me, this says that the differences between students, the things that enrich university life, aren't being supported and aren't being catered for. And that creates a troubling precedent. It makes sense why Buyers Remorse exists then, if not only am I able to say that, but Zipporah and Nicola, different generations of our students who know this experience and who feel this experience. To go on to decoloniality specifically, as an artist, to have a decolonized practice, in essence, is the management of the bedrock of stereotypes and histories of coloniality. What I mean is, it's an understanding that fundamentally the foundation of the institutions you work with, the society you engage with, the place you play, the HMRC, where you pay your taxes, where you go to the bank, those are all built on stereotypes and histories that aren't meant for you. And with that understanding, as an artist and as a person who criticizes, who responds to, and who works within those circles of society, it then becomes, as an individual, you must be aware what your principles are, what your context is, and manage and negotiate within that society. That is decoloniality as an artist, is what I heard us say. It is about managing our context, and it is about managing ourselves and being flexible within that. It is also communal. It's a collective act. It is collectively resisting and changing and responding to, and as Griselda will say, and as Helen will say, resisting those systems of oppression as we meet them. It is about choosing the way we interact with ourselves and standing within our individual principles. It's about consciousness, and it is about being aware of not only our surroundings, not only our context, but also understanding that we are always consciously managing those higher histories. We are never not surrounded by colonial history. Also, it is about locating ourselves, locating our histories and our narratives, and choosing to stand within those, rather than to take the stereotypes and traditions that affect and impact us as people of color. Fundamentally, the perspectives of, to bring it back to the school, the perspectives of people of color, I heard me, Zipporah, and Akila say, have not been supported and are not supported. And as their white peers are the majority, their perspectives are drowned out. And they are first to stand in the awareness of racism. And it appears so, and as we will go on to say, alone. And that is a reality that I became aware of in Akila's talk, and something I already knew.
I'm going to speak now about the talk with Griselda Pollock. Professor Griselda Pollock joined the School of Fine Art, History of Art and Cultural Studies in 1977 and is a world-renowned art historian. In the discussion with Zipporah and Carmen after her talk, Griselda told a story. She'd been invited by Lubena Himid to an event set up alongside the 1995 exhibition Thin Black Line. Lubena Himid initiated the event as a tea party, as a place where conversation would happen. Griselda described a moment of raising a hand, prepared and ready to take part in the Tea Party conversation. Yet as soon as she raised her hand, she retracted it, realising suddenly, viscerally, this was not her conversation, that this was a space where Black artists could speak as artists about their art and about their practices. Griselda realised that she and the other white women there, in Griselda's words, were not the centre of this conversation, but were in fact the dark shadow or stain on the lives of other people who are trying to do what you are not making it possible for them to do fully. Through these words, I know that I am one of those being called by Griselda, as another white woman employed in the same school, into a recognition that I too have been and still far too often cast this same shadow. Earlier in her talk, Griselda spoke of how this dark stain or shadow exists in the classrooms of the School of Fine Art, History of Art and Cultural Studies, an experience joined by Zipporah and Carmen in their experiences of being in the school. In 1984, Zipporah Biswas, who became a renowned conceptual artist, told Griselda, "You are failing to feed me," that the experience of the classroom is lonely and unsafe. More than 30 years on, it was that Zipporah Biswas had been to Leeds that encouraged Carmen to come. Carmen said she thought it suggested that there was something there. Yet arriving, Carmen and Zipporah said they recognised Griselda's word, lonely. Zipporah, responding to Griselda, said, "I've never been taught by someone that looks like me in any of the 4 years I've been here." Carmen, having thought there was something here, said that in fact she'd had to find ways of feeding herself through becoming part of a community of Black feminists, by surrounding herself with pictures of her friends, with Zipporah as a muse, rather with the resources offered in the classroom or in the studio, not with what we offered her, but with her own community making. It was only then Carmen felt, now I can make work. We as staff are called to hear this. We continue to not feed, we fail to nourish, we continue to create spaces that are not safe. In her talk, Griselda spoke of the reputation the school has, a reputation of radicalism because of the Marxist and feminist art historical and art practices of Griselda and others. In calling to other members of staff, Griselda used the vocabulary offered by Layla F. Saad in her Me and White Supremacy, a book that a number of members of staff in the school have read and discussed in circles, working circles, reading circles, discussion circles, that in this sense of our own radicalism lies white exceptionalism, of assuming that because you are part of a place that has done something in the past, that you are all right, better than, not racist, the dangers of the school trading on its history. Through making this point, Griselda spoke of inaction, the inactivity, the passivity of not actively acting in how these lonely, dangerous classroom spaces are created. Griselda argued that if you are not actively speaking to race, to class, to gender, to sexuality, and feeling the urgency of this, then Griselda suggested there is a psychological violence, a soul death. Through inaction, we remain the dark shadow. Griselda spoke of Me and White Supremacy journaling and its requirement to really think about how white supremacy is experienced by us in our everyday lives through raced moments, the moments where racist thoughts flash through deeply conditioned minds, leading to overcompensation, such as the strained smile at a stranger to make up for a first reaction. As a response to this, Griselda speaks of her commitment to the idea of entanglement, noting the genealogy of entanglement from Edouard Glissant to Nakiye Membe, and how an active, connected politics can offer an unplaiting of these powerful normative logics. In making these political connections, we are, Griselda said, all responsible for each other and responsible for being attentive not only to where normative forms of power touch our lives, but how they touch others differently. In this endeavour, Griselda argues that there is a need to populate the classroom with different thinkers and to expand who is in the classroom through these thinkers' words, where theories are tools to pierce the surface. This, Griselda argues, is why the university is important. While it is an institution, and as Griselda put it, is powerful, it will buy us off or we will leave. Griselda also said there remains an intellectual and political potential here, cells of action and energy will affect other cells, are spreading out and are connecting, shaping an environment. Griselda spoke a Jewish phrase: "The world has been destroyed or poisoned. I can't get it right myself, but I cannot desist in any day's labour towards this reparation. This is the obligation Griselda has helped us articulate."
Thank you, Helen. Thanks, Carmen and Zipporah. So I'm going to hand the mic back over to Zipporah and Carmen to speak back to their intention for the project and just more generally.
Thank you, Nicola. So I'll start us off. And fundamentally, buyer's remorse is, as we keep saying, a response. It responds to our experience of university, it responds to our community's experience of university, and it responds to the fact that there was a simultaneous shared experience of something needs to change. And that was what we heard from our friends, that was what we heard from each other, and that is what we thought we heard during BLM. And even before that, because Buyers Remorse predates BLM. We came up with Buyers Remorse in February of 2020. Yes, yeah. February of 2020, Zipporah came to me with this concept and we worked on it together for months. And one thing I think has become clear to me, and if I could pass anything on, I would pass this. I have had a very colorblind experience at university, and I use that term with an understanding of what it is. I'm not colorblind, and I don't see the individuals necessarily as being colorblind, but as a whole, the university itself has treated me, and I have now known through talking to other people of color in the school, as if we do not have color, but we are people of color. Our lives, our experiences are tinged, as we keep saying, with color. We know and experience the world as people of color. To render us, to be colorblind is to render us invisible, to make us small. It doesn't solve the problem of racism, and it treats color like a problem. That's not what needs to be done. That's not the solve. There needs to be an established acknowledgement of difference. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is a conscious effort or singling out of people of color. That is not what we're asking for. We're asking for room to be people of color and to experience that, and not to feel like sore thumbs in a space, because we're not. We are members of this community, and we acknowledge, and I would acknowledge us for our differences, because it is a part of the university experience to be enriched. That is my experience and my knowledge, and that diversity is an enrichment, and our differences are and should be supported.
Thank you, Carmen. Okay, so my final ones are this. Throughout planning and enacting this project, it's become very obvious how slow this university and this school moves when it comes to the work of decolonisation. And if I want anything to come of Buyers Remorse, it is the message that the work of decolonisation is a desperately urgent one. There may be thinking among us that, no, we've done enough, we've done this and that, or maybe thoughts that change is coming, we've made plans for such and such. But in all my years, I have felt none such care. In fact, I felt overwhelmingly alone in this feeling of neglect and the supposed ignorance my race affords me in education and work. So changes over the horizon do not affect students that are here now and those that have left. Change is so incremental as almost inconsequential. Changing one reading list, hiring one more minority staff member, making one more pledge against racism, closing the awarding gap in 20, whatever, I've already left, it's too late. I have been missed. All these actions seem reactionary anyway. I see no school-led initiatives to truly tackle the root cause of the evils of colonialism and racism that lie in the bones of this school. Not without radical, conscious, thoughtful, sustainable action can you ever hope to even try to decolonize this school. It should not rely on students such as Carmen and I to do so, nor should it rest in the hands of BIPOC staff members. The fact that Carmen and I felt the need to do this project at all, as well as still advocate to do this project in a pandemic, while we were both in our final years, while also completing our dissertations is a shame, and a glaring sign of how much work is left to be done when we leave.
And I'll add to that as well. There is this real trend of burden of change and the burden to make change. And often we've observed it lying on the minority people, the BIPOC staff members and students, and BIPOC activists. Now, it is not the job of the minority to change the majority. And I say this not coming from a sociological perspective or cultural. I'm merely speaking as where the burden of change should lie. This burden of change is here because of an apathy. It's an apathy. If the majority is comfortable, if our white peers are comfortable in the colorblind and they don't see the blindness, then why would they want the change? That's the question that's asked. It has been said from Martin Luther King to Griselda Pollock to countless people have said this term, but if people are comfortable with this slanted scale, then it will stay. And that slanted scale leaves the burden of change on the minority because we have to step up and do the job. It cannot be on the students to self-organize. It should be encouraged. It is good. It is fun to self-organize, but it is also an incredible burden to take on decolonizing an entire school in your third year. And that's just what we've done. Not talk of the work before us and the work that will come after us or the work that's going on right now. We should feel like it is our choice, our passion to do this work, not like we are being forced to. White apathy is the burden I speak of, and it is the burden that we have taken on. We have chosen to take this on. We didn't have to, but we felt like we had to. And we made that choice. It sounds like a double negative, but it isn't, because we were a student of color who felt underrepresented and lonely. So we wanted to make it better for ourselves and for our colleagues. And that's what we've been trying to do. Unfortunately, the majority are the tastemakers. The majority of staff and students who are white are the tastemakers. They get to decide how things move. They set the community. They create the community because they are the community. And quite frankly, there are not enough BIPOC members of staff who are here permanently and who can do change, and students as well. We're only here for 3 years. We're too fast and fleeting. We can't make long-lasting change. We can try, but it's kind of a race against the clock. We don't have the time, and it's frankly not our job. Our job is to learn. Our job is to start our careers, and we're doing that. But we've taken on this burden as well. And what we're asking is that someone else comes in. No, what we're asking is that the community takes it up as well, because it is not our job. Every single person who's come to every single Buyers Remorse event has been a BIPOC person, or occasionally we've had a couple other members of staff. But our consistent audience are ourselves. We preach the choir often, and that, quite frankly, isn't good enough. This is not our job. This is not our burden. And I don't think, and we will take up our own burdens in our careers and as our passions dictate, but the school's burden is not ours, and we are graduating, so you're on your own.
Okay, so my final words are this. I really hope as Carmen and me leave this work, it continues properly and it doesn't just peter out into the nothingness. I want our experiences and the known and anonymous voices that spoke out in this community to give you the bearing of our importance, as well as how many people you are leaving behind when this work is not given the true weight it deserves. I truly hope that real change comes. I hope it is dynamic, radical, caring, thoughtful. I hope it stays, and I hope it is greatly felt. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen and Zipporah. Thank you so much. Okay, we are now going to share 3 minutes of silence together. So like I said at the beginning, this is an opportunity to reflect for us all on what we might have heard, to reflect on what's being presented, and we acknowledge that the content of this sharing will be impacting on us all differently, giving rise to a unique set of questions for us all that we may wish to return to following this talk also. So I am going to keep us to time, and I'll just mute myself. Okay, thanks everyone. We finished early because I was so tight with us all on time. I was so strict. So I guess that means everyone's got time to eat their sandwiches or have a break before next meetings. We're not going to do any like question or answer or anything like that in this session. The website's still up. It's got links to all the talks on YouTube. It's also got amazing resources that Carmen and Zipporah have put together alongside the complaints gallery as well. It'll be up online for like another 8 months or 9 months, and then it will be archived. We're still deciding where to archive it. And there might be a Buyers Remorse zine coming out maybe. So look out for that too. So thank you all for joining us. Should we say bye? Carmen and Zipporah, Helen, is that all right? Should we just... Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you for coming, everyone.
Thank you. Have good afternoons. Bye-bye. Helen, you can stop the recording as well, actually.